Good afternoon, Tony Dattino. I am the founder of the USA Memory Championship and had the occasion this week to go up to Charleston, South Carolina for the Shriners Basketball Classic. Thursday, Friday, and of course it finished yesterday. And it was interesting sitting, fortunately, had great seats, sitting close to where you can hear the players talking and the coaches. And it was interesting watching the different teams play and the different level of intensity. And as I watched, I'm thinking about, first of all, the coaches, the leaders of the teams, and walking up and down on the sidelines. And sometimes I wonder how they keep their voice for 2 hours and don't either suck on lozenges all evening or afternoon, but my goodness, trying to scream over a crowd that was announced at about 5,000 people. And so getting close to the floor, I was interested in two things, which I subsequently talked to Robert Ajemian from MIT Neuroscience, McGovern Brain Institute. And one was the intensity of the players. And you could see it on some teams. And the thing I was wondering is, gee, do you coach intensity of players? You've got two responsibilities, obviously. One is to get them to play and know what the plays are and follow what the plays are. And certainly they have to remember that. So that's the cognitive function that I was thinking about as I watched them pass and move around and set picks and dribbles and where they were going in the court. So there's got to be certain memory skills that they have, first of all, in the basics of the play. But then there's muscle memory that comes into the brain's physical movements and how they pass or shoot or jump, do whatever their physical actions were. And then the third thing that I watched is what I think of as emotional inspiration, passion, the love of the game and the love of competition, and how well your brain processes those elements. So we're looking at the different elements of cognitive memory, muscle memory, and then emotional response to the situation. And so I had the opportunity of watching half a dozen games. And it was interesting to see the teams and how the teams played, how the coaches responded, the encouragement they got, sometimes the frustrations of a bad play that turned some of these games very, very close and ended by a couple of points. So every play is important to the final outcome. And how do you get a group of college kids to understand that and have enough of discipline to be intelligent about everything that they're doing? So how much can they be thinking about what they do versus how much is spontaneous and it just comes in the moment and the variation? And then how bad do they want to compete? How's their emotional brain responding? So it was interesting because I was talking to Robert Ajemian from MIT yesterday. Yes, it was a Sunday, and Robert and I usually catch up on Sunday afternoons. There was not a good game that I was watching on the TV, so it was okay, not a big problem. I'm in Windermere, Florida, and we only had one game on that was totally one-sided, so it was all okay. And we started to talk about the different sports and the different memory skills and the motor memory skills, the spontaneity based on different sports. And Robert had a hypothesis about baseball teams that finish with 100 wins in a season and then don't win in the playoffs. And we compared baseball to football and basketball. And what types of memory, what kinds of muscle retention does the body have to have, and what's the right skills and the practices? So I remember talking to a coach of one of the teams in Charleston. Can you teach intensity? It was an interesting question because I watched a couple of games and I said, wow, there's one team there that has got a lot more intensity. You could feel it. You're sitting there. We were only in the third row off the court. So it was really, you could feel the intensity of this one team of players. And it raised the question during halftime, the coach that I was talking with, can you teach intensity? And his answer was clearly, yes, you absolutely can. And there are there's repetition you can do that really locks it in, so that at every play, at every second, and every moment, it just becomes an innate, natural flow, right? We talk about flow in athletics a lot, that it becomes just an innate, natural flow of how you play the game. And now my question to Robert was, gee, how many repetitions do you have? How much practice? How long does practice have to be in order to do these things? And does it matter if you're a baseball player, or you're a basketball player, or you're a football player? And football players seem to be the easiest in terms of retention of plays and the variation that takes place. When you look at a lineman and the blocking he's got to have and the different schemes, I guess the pass receivers and the quarterbacks have a lot of diversity based on how they're cutting and how far they're going and what yard line. And then the motor skill of the quarterback has got to be as perfect as can be. So there's different elements of memory that are taking place in the different elements of the game in a football game. Now let's go to basketball, right? I'm watching these 6 different teams, and they all seem to have the same way of coming down court and setting up their offense. So I'll talk for a minute about offense. They all seem to have a circle around the top of the key, they call it, where they shoot fouls, so around the key. They all have this passing, and they're all trying to get to the corners so they can shoot 3-point shots without anybody blocking them. So that seems to be, how do we pass the ball around fast enough to create an opening on one of the sides? And some teams just drive the sides and leave the middle. So it's interesting to see the different variation, but then it becomes, okay, and how well does a shooter, when he's shooting a 3 or a foul shot, or a shot from the middle of the court, how much practice do they have to have, and how many hours and how many different shots do they make before it becomes locked into your, I'm a right-hander, so I'm going to use my right hand. How many practices do I have to have that locks it into my brain to be able to go up there and just innately shoot this thing? And then you watch shots that look like they're easy, and they're under the basket, somebody comes along, tries to block it, and now you miss what appears to be easy shots. So how do you practice for these things? How do you teach a group of players, and now we can go to the NBA and go through the same routine, how do you teach these people, and how do you separate elite performance from practicing versus, you know what, I'm just a naturally born gifted athlete, which gets me to come right back to memory. How many people think that you either have your memory, you either have the ability to lock these things in, or in fact, you can learn them. There's skills that you can learn, there's practicing you can do. And so I'm just watching sports through Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and I'm thinking of all the work we do with memory, and then thinking about the differences of cognitive function, the intellectual side of memory, what we are aware of and what we study and practice and do in terms of retention of information and plays, versus the innate things that we just subconsciously, after practicing what we call the motor memory skills, just becomes, hey, this is how I don't even stop and think about it. I just do it because I've practiced it so many times. It's just like a spontaneous interaction I have given a variation in a situation that I'm confronted in. And then you go to baseball, and you say, God, what happens in basketball and what happens in football, how does that apply to baseball? Back to Robert's point, why do teams that win 100 games in a season turn around and fail in a World Series or fail in playoffs? And what happens to their ability to practice and lock in, and they got to look at their eyes, and so their eyes are looking at a 99-hour pitch coming in, which occurs and it moves, and then their bat, where they can hit it. You know, how do you lock those skills into baseball players, and how many hours and days of practice do you have to get in order to get the outcomes of being able to score runs and win games? So I found it the whole weekend, it was just fascinating to me in the study of athletics and the work that we do in terms of memory, be it cognitive, be it subconscious and innate, and emotions involved. How do you teach people, athletes, to get emotionally committed? And does it matter what the crowd is doing? So I'm sitting there listening to, and one team just brought thousands of fans to the arena, and they are cheering their team on. And then the question I had to Robert is, how much does that influence? And you talk about the home team advantages. And so I'm looking at all of these natural things that we see in sports endeavors and wondering how active are crowd activities impacting the actual performance of players. And so Robert talked about the home field advantage and how statistics will bear out that there is clearly an advantage. And is that purely because of the screaming and yelling and how loud people are opposing the other team? And then can the other team practice something in that regard? And so I remember one of the NFL football coaches one time loaded their practice fields with loudspeakers and just built up lots of noise so the players would be used to crowd noise. So what can we teach people? So I'm always interested in what are learnable skills that impact our thinking, that impact our heart in terms of emotion, and then physically the motor skills. And so I just found my conversation with Robert kind of culminated a really fantastic Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday of watching various sports from basketball to football and thinking about the baseball playoffs. So with that is, hopefully I leave you with a few thoughts about that. Have you ever stopped to think about what are memory skills that we need to teach athletes that help them retain the plays and what they're supposed to be doing, whether on a football field, a baseball field, or a basketball court? And then where does their motor memory come into play? Then last but not least, how does the emotional aspects of life fit in? Can emotions really change a baseball game? Though it appears that it can influence a basketball game and a football game, do our emotions impact an ability for somebody to get up there and hit a home run or hit a ball out of the park or hit a base hit or plain strike out? Does it influence a pitcher who's throwing the pitch to home plate? Those are just some of my questions that kicked around and left me wanting to share some of that with my Live with Tony audience. Have a good week. We have turkey on Thursday coming up, or whatever the family's going to have. And so I shall see you back here on Wednesday.